just look at this beauty. This summer blanket is made from Bliss Dulcie. It's a chunky airborne cotton that's just perfect for a lightweight summer blanket or throw when you're sitting in the garden and the breeze gets up. Join me and I'll show you how to make it. Let's have a look at how we make these beautiful puff stitch squares. They're a mixture of puff stitches and then UK trebles, US double crochets around the side. It makes a really nice dense square that we're going to then put together to make a beautiful blanket. And the lovely thing about this is that when I'm just going to show you, when they're all sewn together like this, you can't see obviously with all the corners in, but you just get this gorgeous set of triangular puffs going all the way through it. It's gorgeous. Now I'm making this, I've got one here to show you. I'm making this lovely blanket in Bliss Dulcie. Now Dulcie is a sort of an air-blown cotton, slightly sort of chainette. It's a lovely cotton because it doesn't split, because it has this sort of chainette construction, but it has a slight fuzz to it, but it's the perfect summer cotton weight for a blanket when you don't particularly want to make something that's going to take you forever. So it's nice to make something in a chunky weight. So we're going to look at how we make this puff stitch square. So I've got a ball here of, this is duck egg. There are some amazing shades to choose from in Dulcie. They're all beautiful sort of pastel ice cream shades. This one is my absolute favourite because I'm a big duck egg fan. And I am going to use a 6mm hook, which is the hook or knitting needle size that's sort of suggested for this yarn. But if you know that you're either, you know, a sort of a supersonic death grip crocheter or you're a bit of a loose goose, just make sure that you change the hook size accordingly to get the tension we're working on. So here, this square ends up being 19 centimetres square. If you know that you're a bit of a loose crocheter, then go down half a size to a 5.5. If you are somebody who crochets really, really tightly, go up to a 7. With these yarns and puff stitches in particular, you just got to test it out and see what your tension's like. Now, the way that it works, we start off with 8 puff stitches and some chains in the centre, and then we work 5 rows, 5 rounds out. So let's get started. One square, one 19 centimetre square, uses about, I would say that's what I've got left from one square. So uses around about, 3/4 of a ball. So make sure you get the number of balls sort of -2 or 3 that you want to make in terms of how many for a square, how many squares you want to make, because this is the sort of blanket. It's modular, so you can make it as big or as small as you want. It's perfect cotton for babies, but it's also just lovely to have as a sort of a gorgeous soft cotton throw for when you're sitting on a chair in the garden or on the beach and there's a slight chill in the air. So let's get started. I've made a slip knot and then I'm going to chain 4. Now, when we make this first centre, and I've got it here, I'm going to keep this next to me so you can see as we go along. We've got to get 8 puff stitches in here. And the reason we start with chains and making a circle that way rather than a magic ring is simply because it's easier to hold. But if you prefer to use a magic ring, by all means do that. So I'm going to now, done 4 chains, I'm going to join using a slip stitch. So I just put my hook into the last stitch there, and then with the working yarn, just hook it round and bring that working yarn through the 2 loops. So you've joined them to make a circle. You might think to yourself, wow, that's not very big to get 8 puff stitches in, but you'd be surprised what we can get in here. So I'm going to begin by chaining 2. Again, if you know you have a loose tension, chain 2 for a UK treble, US double crochet. If you're a bit of a tight crocheter, chain 3. So I'm going to yarn over, this is our first puff stitch, yarn over, put my hook into the circle and pull up a loop. Now this loop that you're going to pull up here will denote how tall the puff stitch is. So if you make it like that, very tight, you're going to have a very small puff stitch. So for those of you that pull your yarn afterwards, try and give yourself enough room to have a nice deep puff stitch. So we're going to do that 4 more times. Yarn over, pull up a loop. See, I'm pulling it up to the same height. Yarn over, pull up a loop. And then the 5th, yarn over, pull up a loop. So you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 loops on the hook. We yarn over and then hold the bottom of that puff stitch when you pull the hook through all 9. And then chain 1. That's your first puff stitch. It doesn't look very puff stitchy at the moment when it's on its own, but what we're going to do is I'm going to yarn over and do exactly the same into the circle. So we've got to yarn over into the circle, pull up a loop, and remember pulling it up quite deeply. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 9 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through all of them and chain 1. Now that's the first pair of puffs, and you can see that we're going to have to squish around quite a lot to get all of these in. Now I'm going to make a chain here, so I'm making 1 little chain space here, and we do the same thing again. So we're going to yarn over into the middle and pull up a loop, and again just make sure it's quite a nice deep loop for your puff stitch. Yarn over, pull up a loop, that's 2, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull up a loop. I never got there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 loops on the hook, yarn over and pull through and chain 1. And the chain 1 on the top of the puff, that just secures those loops together. And then we're going to do the same thing again. Yarn over into the circle and pull up a loop. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can see I'm keeping them all the same depth. And then yarn over and pull through all 9. Oopsie. And chain 1. And now I'm going to do exactly the same thing again. Yarn over into the circle, pull up a loop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yarn over, pull through all 9 and chain 1. Now at this point I'm just unravelling as I go, and this is a very yarn hungry stitch, the puff stitch, which is why these squares take up such a lot of yarn, but they're so pretty. So now we've got 2 and a chain space, 2 and a chain space. So I've got 1 here, so I'm just going to wriggle those round and do the number 6. Yarn over into the circle and pull up a loop. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 9 on 9 loops on there. Yarn over and pull through them all, and chain 1 on the top, and then we're going to put another chain 1 in because we're going to have another group of 2. So can you see here I've done 2 and then a chain space, 2 and then a chain space, 2, and then I've just added in 1 more chain, and here we go again for the last 2 puff stitches. And when you look at that you think, crikey, I'm not going to fit those in there. You just have to pull it round and squeeze them in. yarn over into the circle and pull up a loop. That's the number 1. Yarn over 2, 3, 4, 5. And at this point, when you go to pull through all 9 together, yarn over, you can just pinch the bottom there gently to pull through, and then chain 1. We've got 1 more puff stitch to get in, so I'm just pulling that round to fit it in. Yarn over into the circle, pull up a loop, that's number 1. Whoopsie. Pick up my working yarn again, just drop that. Yarn over, that's 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's really getting quite congested in there, but it's okay. Yarn over, pull through all 9. Have to wiggle that one through a little bit. Actually, now that's a good thing to happen. If you lose the yarn in the middle of a puff stitch, just pull out and start again. Yarn over into the middle and pull up a loop. Yarn over 2, 3, 4, 5. So you've got 9 on the hook there. Yarn over, and again just pull through, wiggle it through, and then chain 1. Now because we've got 2, 2, 2 and 2, I'm going to put a chain in here, which is the chain space between each 2. And then we're going to join with a slip stitch just in the top of the first puff stitch. Join and pull through. Now that is the beginning of the square. So we have 4 groups of 2 puff stitches with a chain space in each corner. To work from here onto the next round, which is this one here, I think it's easier to work from the corner. So instead of working from here, just setting off another row of stitches from here, I'm going to slip stitch to get myself over into the corner here. Now slip stitching is the sort of crochet alternative to sort of stepping to the side. It doesn't have any height to it, but it just allows you to move from stitch to stitch without raising anything. And we do that by just putting your hook in. You can go a couple at a time, you don't have to do every single stitch. Put your hook in, pull the working yarn through, and then through the one on your hook. And you see that's moved you along one. And then I'm going to move from here into the corner. I put my hook in, pull up the loop, and then pull that loop through the one on your hook. And that has almost just like sidestepped me from over here into the corner here. So I'm actually going to start this one with chain 2, the beginning of our first puff stitch. So I'm going to yarn over into the chain space and pull up a loop. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got 9 loops on the hook, yarn over and pull through all 9 and chain 1. Now at this point where we're creating this here, I'm going to put a chain space in the middle to allow us to keep working down. So I put 1 chain there, and then we're going to put another puff stitch into the same chain space. Yarn over into the chain space and pull up a loop. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm going to yarn over and pull the hook all the way through and then chain 1. So what you've got is the first corner, because we're working into corners here, the first corner of the second round. Now, after these 2 puff stitches, we just put in US double crochets, which is a UK treble, into the chains, into the stitches on the top here. And each time we go subsequent rounds, we're going to fill each side of the squares with US double crochets, UK trebles. So I'm going to put a US double crochet in this stitch, and this stitch. These are your UK trebles, US double crochet. So yarn over into the top of the stitch there, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then yarn over into the next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then into the top of this puff stitch here, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Now the next thing that we need to put in is the 2 puff stitches into this next corner of the square. So I'll just get myself a fair old bit of yarn ready, because we know these puff stitches eat a lot. So we yarn over into the chain space and pull up a loop. That's number 1 big nice puff stitch loop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then yarn over, pull through all 9 loops and chain 1. Then we're going to chain 1 to make the corner, and we're going to put another puff stitch into that space. So just the same again, yarn over into this chain space and pull up a loop, yarn over, that's number 2, 3, 4, 5, and then yarn over and pull through all 9, and then put a chain on the top. Now what we've done now, if you can see there, is we're coming up to the next side of our square. So we've got 2 puff stitches and then some double crochets US, and then another puff stitch corner, and then we're going to put in these 3 stitches here, we're going to put a double crochet US UK treble. So yarn over into the top of the stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and the same into the next stitch, and the same into the next stitch. So between each corner on this round there are 3 stitches. Now we've come to the next corner, the 3rd corner, and we're going to put, as we have with the others, 2 puff stitches with a chain in between. Yarn over into the chain space and pull up a loop, that's number 1, yarn over, number 2, yarn over, number 3, number 4, number 5, and now we have 9 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through all 9 and a chain to secure it, then 1 chain to give it a little gap, and then we do another puff stitch straight into the same chain space here, yarn over into the chain space, pull up a loop, that's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yarn over and pull through and a chain. So we've done 3 corners, we've got 3 stitches before our next corner, which is going to be here. So yarn over, put US double crochet UK treble, 1, 2, 3, and here we are at the last corner where we're going to put in 2 puff stitches and then finish off that round. So yarn over, pull up a loop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yarn over, pull through all 9, chain 1, then a chain, yarn over, and we do another puff stitch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yarn over, pull through all 9, add a chain, and now we're at the point where we've got 3 stitches to come back to the original place we started. So we put in our 3 double crochets, 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to join with a slip stitch to the first puff stitch. Now this makes our first round of the square. Let's go and have a look at round 2. Right, let's have a look at row 2. I'm just going to sort of think of this as the middle, and this will be round 1 and then round 2. The rest of the rounds on this square are worked the same way. So we end up with the puff stitches creating the corners of each round, and the number of the US double crochets, UK trebles, increases each time you go round. So there are 6 rounds in total, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's including the middle. So let's do round 2, which is this one here, and you can see how it works for the whole of the square. So because I'm in the corner here, or I'm across at the end of the last little stitch part, I want to get round into the corner to work the next round. So I'm going to slip stitch my way round, which if you remember from this round, is just a way of stepping to the side when you're crocheting. So I'm just going to put my hook in, pull through, and then pull through the loop I have on the hook. And then one more. So I'm going into the chain space, pull through, and then through the loop. And that, you can see, has got me from here to here without raising any stitches. It's just kept me flat. And the slip stitch is always extremely useful for that. When you're making anything at all, if you think, oh, I'd rather be over there, then you can just slip stitch your way there without adding any height. So here we are in the corner. So we're going to put in 2 puff stitches with a chain in the middle like we did before. So we just start off with 2 chains and then yarn over, pull up a loop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm going to say actually that the chains, when I'm doing chain 2 at the beginning of a round, I'm not counting that as part of the stitches. And the reason for that is just because it sort of gets swallowed up into this puff stitch. And I like the fact that it gets swallowed up because you can't see it. So we do yarn over and pull through all 9 and chain 1. Then do 1 chain, and we're going to do another puff stitch into the same chain space in the corner. Yarn over, pull up a loop, nice and tall. 1, 2, 3, and this last one is the 5th. So we have 9 loops on the hook, yarn over, and I always just hold the bottom where you pull through, and then chain 1 to secure the puff. Now we're going to go across the side of the square, and we're going to put the US double crochet UK treble into each stitch all the way along, and that means you're putting it into the top of the puff stitch of the previous round. So yarn over into the stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then we work your US double crochets, UK triples, whoops, into each stitch along the side. I love this actually because it gives you a really nice solid granny square, which keeps you cozy with the blanket, not too many holes. So we're going to work into the top of that puff stitch there. Even though you sort of think, oh, well, I could go straight into the chain space, you need to work into the top of the puff stitch from the previous round. There we go. So now we're at the corner. So we're ready to put in our 2 puff stitches with a chain in the middle. Sorry, it's the big swallow. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over. This is 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have our 9 loops, yarn over, pull through all 9 and chain 1. Chain 1 for the gap in between the puff stitches, and then we're going to put another puff stitch into the same chain space. Yarn over round, pull up a loop, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then yarn around, pull through all 9 loops and chain 1, and that's our second corner. Now along the side here of the square, we're going to work a US double crochet, UK treble into every single stitch, and not forgetting the tops of the 2 puff stitches here. So yarn over into the top of the stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So that's our US double crochet, UK treble, all the way along the side of your square. And I'm going to put one into the top there. So we're ready to put the corner in here, which is 2 puff stitches. You do spend your life pulling out big runs of yarn when you do puff stitches because they really eat a lot, but it's worth it. Yarn around, pull up a loop, whoopsie, yarn around, pull up a loop, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then, so I've caught a little bit there, but it will just tuck away. Yarn around and pull through all those 9, chain 1, and then I'm going to chain 1 to go in between the puff stitches on the corner like we have here. Work another one into the same, whoopsie, I'm catching a little bit of cotton from the row below. So we're 1, oh, I pulled it again. Look, that's where I've pulled it before. Yarn around, pull up a loop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yarn over and pull through all 9 and chain 1. So that's the third corner, and now we're going to work double crochet US treble UK all the way along the side of the square. Yarn around into the first stitch, yarn over 2, yarn over into the stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then we do that all the way along, not forgetting to go into the tops of the puff stitches at the end, at the beginning and the end of each of that little side of the square. Now we're on this last corner, So we're going to put in 2 puff stitches as we have here with a chain in the middle. So we're just going to recreate this. Yarn over into the chain space, pull up a loop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then yarn over, pull through all 9, chain 1 in between, and then we're going to do another puff stitch into that corner. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yarn over and pull through all 9 and chain 1. And now we're actually just at the top on the last run of the square. So US double crochets, UK trebles all the way along. And here's a good example actually of why you need to work into the tops of the puff stitches from the previous round, because it just makes the square. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 going along there. So we yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. By now you know how to do a double crochet US. Yarn over into each stitch and put one of those in every stitch until we get to the other corner. Got one more there, and then there's one more here on top of the puff stitch, so that one goes in, and then we're going to join to the other corner here with a slip stitch. So just put your hook through the top, pull through, and then pull through the loop on your hook, and that is round 2. Now all the subsequent rounds are exactly the same as that. You work the corners and then your double crochet US or trebles UK, corner stitches, all the way around, and there are 6 rounds in total to get a square that measures around about 19 centimetres. And remember, that's going to change depending on your tension, but about if you aim for and sort of 19, 20 centimetre square. And that becomes this. So you can see how it grows out. And then when you've got as many of these squares as you want to build your blanket, so if you're doing a baby blanket, I would say probably you need, let's think, 9 squares, 3 lots of 3, to make a really nice square, and then you could put really lovely edging on it. And then depending on how big you want to make your blanket, you can just keep going. The alternative to making modular squares like this is that you can just keep repeating these rounds. And this square has the potential to just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger by making one giant puff stitch square. And that also is a very lovely way to make a square blanket. So there are so many different colours of Dulcie too, so you can have a look. I've got some other squares I'll show you in a minute of just how these colours work beautifully together. So here we have some of the colours of Dulcie, and you can see they're just beautiful ice cream shades. They all look lovely in these puff stitches. And there are also a couple of lilacs. There's a sort of a dusty lilac and then a pale lilac. There's a more of a, this one is like the ecru, and I think there is a darker teal as well. They're absolutely gorgeous. So you could put together a pastel blanket with all of these colours mixed up together, or you could stick with the same shade, which actually is what I'm going to do with my duck egg. But let's just talk about joining squares, because it is, if you've done any kind of granny square stuff before, you will be at home with this. But if you haven't, there are lots of different ways to join squares together. So on the edge of your squares, the beauty of this is that you always have the same count down the sides. So you've got the same number of stitches to join, but there are various ways to do it. So you can either crochet your squares together, or you can use a needle if you prefer to sew them together. And either is fine. It doesn't matter which way you do it. In terms of how to join them together, there are a few different routes you can take. So with the side of the granny square stitch, let's have a look. And so the side of a crochet stitch, you know, we have the little V, the back loop and the front loop of the stitch. And you can either join through one of the loops or the other loop or both the loops. So you get a different look when you do those things. So for example, when you join through both loops together, you get quite a nice kind of train track. If you join just the back loops together, I think the best thing is for me to just show you. So I'm going to just show you. I've got some pink here. I've got pink yarn and I'm going to join two different colour ones together so you can see the yarn and how it joins. Obviously, if you do this with the same colour yarn, the join disappears. So I've got two squares together, but I'm doing it with this contrast yarn so you can see how it works. To crochet the squares together, and I'm just going to crochet a bit in the middle here. Let's start off by doing the whole of the stitch. I'll start down here. The whole of the stitch and the whole of the stitch. So we're working both legs of the stitches together. So I'm just going to get a loop like that and pull it through. So I'm going to put my hook underneath both legs of the blue stitch and both legs of the lemon stitch, and then just pull the yarn through like a slip stitch. See? And then do the same over here. In the next stitch, pick up all four legs, pull through and slip stitch. And then you work your way down the squares like this, joining them in exactly this way. And what you get when you join both legs of the stitches together, let's have a look, is a join that looks like that, which is like a sort of a really nice little track. And obviously I'm using a contrast coloured yarn, but if you're using the same colour yarn, it just tends to disappear, but you have just like a really nice, fairly wide join. So if I pull that out, the next thing you could try, and this is entirely down to your preference, is that you could decide to use just the back loops. So that would be this one here, just the back loop of that stitch, and then the front loop, which is the back loop really, of the outside loop, let's call them, of the stitch. So instead of joining with all four legs, just those two closest together. So let's have a look and see what that looks like, just with, and you can do it with a needle or you can do it with a hook, doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to pick up the inside, oopsie, inside loop that are closest together, inside loop, and this gives you a sort of a, maybe probably slightly flatter join. And obviously I'm doing it just some of the way here, but it does give you an idea of how it looks. Right, so let's see. So this is with just the inside loops together, and that is a much smaller, flatter join. And if you could suspend disbelief and think that that was all the same colour yarn, you really wouldn't see it. It would be a pretty flat join. The other thing you could do if you wanted to is you could use a yarn needle, just thread the yarn needle, and you could whip stitch them together. So you could just thread through and go from side to side as if you were just zigzagging one to the other. And I'm deliberately leaving this roomy so you can see what it looks like when I pull it together. But you're just picking up the inside loops. And again, I'm doing it with contrast so you can see, but if you were doing it with your same colour yarn, now if I pull that tight, again, gives you a really flat join, and if you're using the same colour yarn, they sit really flush together when you just stitch them together with a needle. There are lots and lots of ways to join squares together. When you are ready to join up here and you get to join a third one, let's put that there, or maybe a fourth one, then what you need to do here is you're doing the same things, you're still picking up the inside legs of the stitches. I just pretend I'm up here for a minute. Actually, I'm all the way down there. But I would pick up still the legs of the stitch like that to make it, you're still working on the closest legs of the stitches. So just because they happen to be a corner, you can still work on the inside legs of each stitch. And when you come to sort of work them all together like this, it should, theoretically, even if you have to stretch them out a little bit, you can make sure they all fit together really neatly. Just really be careful that you do sew up neatly so that you don't spoil all your work that you've done. Let's go up there. That you've done previously. I would tend to sew a strip together, or fix a strip together, and then make another strip and sew that strip to this strip. That's probably the easiest way to do it, I would think, but you might have your own thoughts on that. If anybody's got any great ideas for sewing up, please leave us a comment and tell us the way you prefer to do it. Other people with granny squares use join as you go, but I'm not going to cover that here. So this is how we make our beautiful Dulcie summer blanket, and I'll show you the finished blanket at the end. Well, I'm happy. I've got my beautiful blanket. I hope you've enjoyed making that. These gorgeous puff stitch squares are just dense enough to keep the breeze out, a little bit more dense than a regular granny square. And there are lots of different puff stitch squares on the internet. This one was on Pinterest. Lots of free square patterns that you can use, but I particularly like this one. What colour are you going to make yours in? Is it going to be multicoloured or all one colour like mine? I'd love to hear. Don't forget to leave me a comment and like and subscribe to the channel for lots more gorgeous knitting and crochet projects. Happy crochet!